Anderson here, basketball strength coach at the University of South Florida, and this is our basketball-only facility. Today I'd like to teach you about one of our movements that we do here with our basketball program. It's called the Landmine pull pop. What we do is we have a landmine row attachment to each one of our platforms. I have 3 platforms. Hook the bar in, set the weight up. We ask our athletes to get in a staggered stance. We create momentum on the bar by doing a row, and then we finish the movement. So the movement looks like this. And that is our landmine pull pop. The reason we developed that movement is coaches are always asking for their athletes to be more explosive, more violent. And there's a multitude of exercises we can do to create the explosion, to create the violence. But when we started watching basketball practice, a lot of the movements came through the transverse plane. And when you look at all our explosive movements that we're typically doing as strength coaches, there's not a lot of transverse plane movement. So through a lot of trial and error and watching a basketball practice, we came up with this movement. One, it does come through with the hips. Also, it's bilateral, so we train both sides. And 2, it gives me a great buy-in factor for the athlete to come in and do extra workouts, push themselves a little bit harder, because there is a good selling point to this exercise. When we develop an exercise, we go through our 3 Ps, our point, our process, and our product, just like anything else we do here. So I'd like to go through that a little bit with you here. The point of this exercise is, again, to provide the athlete an explosive movement to the transverse plane while controlling an external resistance. The process we came up with to create this movement was basically trial and error, utilizing different lifts that we did throughout the season, watching basketball practice, listening to how the coaches preach the movements, especially down low and in the post. We try to utilize a lot of the same lingo here in the weight room. And then we develop this exercise. When we teach this exercise, so the process of teaching, we get our athletes down, we want a staggered stance, because typically how many times are they standing flat-footed or in perfect alignment? So we wanted a staggered stance. We also teach them to keep the elbow out, kind of like they're trying to clear. Again, it's not the exact same motion. I'm not saying this is a sport-specific movement. We do not preach sport specificity here, but we want to keep that elbow out so they get used to having their elbow out. Sports are played with momentum, so we ask them to create momentum first and then create the violent movement. So we create the movement with the row, elbow out, driving that elbow. From that, now we create the momentum and we get a good catch. We're watching for their feet. Are their feet, do they have a good stance? Are they bent knee? Is their elbow in a good catch position? From there, now we're asking the athlete to finish. Step through, finish, full body exercise. Bring it down. Again, we can do the other side too. When we're coaching this, one of the biggest things we see is their back foot. They leave back. So they'll get the row, and they'll come like this. They're leaving half their power behind, and then they'll turn their foot. Well, now we talk to them, if their leg is straight, and as we start to get some good weight on here, they have to recreate, they have to reload. They have to reload and finish. Try to teach them if they reload and finish, they're taking an extra 1/10 of a second. That 1/10 of a second could be the time that the athlete, their opponent, knocks the ball out of their hands, gets into a better defensive position, and then they can't finish the play. So we're always looking to be efficient with the movement. So right here we create momentum again. Pop, knees bent, we're in a good loaded position, and we're finishing. Also through the process, we would try to reverse engineer and see what other exercises we come up to create variety. So first thing we do, we have a row. So we do our row, we add in a nice little row, 1 arm row, elbow out. Then we'll add in a stabilizing row. and RDL, right into a row. A little bit more stabilizing in the hip area, work on that back being flat, and again, keeping that elbow out, trying to create space, or teach them to create space while they're out there on the court. Next thing we got from there, we've got a nice little explosive twist motion. So we take our box jumps, and now we'll have our athlete standing right here, facing the wall, or facing this wall. We do it off of both sides. Again, we want our athletes not to just be good with their right hand, we want to be good with their left hand. We'll have the athlete stand right here, and we're going to get that transverse plane explosive movement. Step, catch, stand up. So again, right here, that transverse plane, create that explosion, create that violent movement, catch, stand up, and finish. From that, we have a nice little lunge. So we'll do our lunges, like everybody does, but we'll add in a little explosive movement into a change of plane. So we'll ask our athletes to stand right here, stabilize with their hip, step off, step back, hip, hip, stick. To add in a higher component of difficulty, we change up where their center of gravity is. We just use a little 10-pound plate. Weight over the head. Now we change the center of gravity. Stabilize. Step. Back into my lunge. Hip, hip. Stick. So a little bit of fun with that. The last part, we have the shoulder press. So as our athletes just stick it up, stabilize, one arm shoulder presses. Take it to the next level. Drop one of the dumbbells down. We'll ask the athlete to stabilize on one hip. We're watching for the core, we're watching it lean. Can they keep everything straight up and down, stabilized, and shoulder press at the same time? So we're getting all those things. So we got a whole bunch of different ways from creating one movement and watching practice and trying to come up with a selling point for our athletes to get them that buy-in factor to stay in my weight room. From that, now we add in a whole bunch of different variety for our athletes. So now they're a little less bored. They're coming in, they want to do extra stuff. They see that they might be weak with sticking a movement. So then we can buy in a little bit more with hip stability. And it just continues keeping the athlete in the weight room, understanding the importance of being in the weight room. So that's our process for creating that movement. And then the product is, now we have an athlete that is more explosive through the transverse plane, can control in momentum, all right, and can control an external weight through a range of motion. If you have any questions, please contact me here at USF. And as always, go Bulls.